Lord, I'm tired.
Tired and my soul needs rest.
So tired.
Tired and my soul
Lord,
needs
you know
rest.
that I'm
Tired and my soul needs rest.
I got to
Find myself a
Lord,
resting
I'm
place.
tired.
Tired and my soul needs rest.
So tired.
Tired and my soul
Lord,
needs
you know
rest.
that I'm
Tired and my soul needs rest.
I got to
Find myself a resting place.
Traveling through this land, I've had so many ups and downs. But one thing I know that's for sure, that I'm bound for higher ground. Lord, I got my hand wrapped up in the timely chain. I got to keep on moving in Jesus' name. You know, when
Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
Lord, I
won't have to cry no more.
Oh no, I
won't have to cry no more.
Lord, you know
When Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
Say it again now.
Won't have to cry no more.
No, I
won't have to cry no more.
Lord, you know
When Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
When I get to heaven, I wanna meet all of my friends there. Most of all, I wanna see Jesus, the one who died, the one who cared. Oh, I wanna see my Savior face to face. You say, come on in, Earl. You know you ran a good race. You know when
Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
No, I
won't have to cry no more.
No, I
won't have to cry no more.
Lord, you know
When Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
Say it again now.
Won't have to cry no more.
No, I
won't have to cry no more.
Lord, you know
When Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
When I get to heaven, I wanna meet all of my friends there. But most of all, I wanna see Jesus, the one who died, the one who cared. Oh, I wanna see my Savior face to face. You say, come on in, Earl. You know you ran a good race. You know when
Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
Lord, I
won't have to cry no more.
No,
I won't have to cry no more.
Lord, you know
When Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
Say it again now.
Won't have to cry no more.
No,
I won't have to cry no more.
Lord, you know
When Jesus come to carry me home, I won't have to cry no more.
That's why I'm tired.
Tired and my soul needs rest.
So tired.
Tired and my soul
Lord,
needs
you know
rest.
that I'm
Tired and my soul needs rest.
I got to
Find myself a
Lord,
resting
I'm
place.
tired.
Tired and my soul
Whoa,
needs rest.
so tired.
Tired and my soul
Lord,
needs
you
rest.
know that I'm
Tired and my
soul
soul
needs
needs
a
rest.
rest. I got to
Find myself a resting
place.
Hello, and welcome to You Don't Know My Story. My name is Cortez Jackson Jr., and I am your host. The first song that you heard this evening from the Omega Men's Choir, this song was dedicated to one of our evangelists. She got up Saturday morning, came to church, did her Christian education program. She went home, took her daughter home. No, she took her daughter shopping. And then she came home and made a nice meal for her family. Sometime around 8, 9 o'clock, she started feeling ill. She was complaining about pain. So they took her to the hospital. 12:15, they pronounced her dead. So I decided that this particular show, I wanted to dedicate the first song that the Omega Men Choir sang will be dedicated to her. And my Pastor Thornton, he lost his nephew, so I was at a funeral for that today, and I'll be going to another one on Saturday. But I wanted to start the show off with a dedication to Evangelist Brenda King. We'll be right back.
I do coke so I can work longer, so I can earn more, so I can do more coke, so I can work longer, so I can earn more, so I can do more coke, so I can work longer, so I can earn more, so I can do more coke, so I can work longer.
Always chasing rainbows.
We're back. Like I said, the name of this program is called You Don't Know My Story. Basically, what it is, people come on and they tell their ups, their downs, and what God has done for them in their life. Now, this is not a gospel show. It's not a gospel program. But God has intervened in our lives one way or the other if we let him. So I got a young man on today. His name is George. Logan? Hi, George. What's going on, brother?
Good evening. How are you doing?
Oh, good. Everything is good. You know, I got a chance to talk to Mr. Logan earlier, and he was starting to tell me some of his story. I had to stop him because I wanted to wait for the show before he started talking about his story. Now, we don't do a lot of questioning. We only help you if you get stuck. But basically what this is about is this gentleman is going to come on and tell his story his way. So I'm going to open up the floor and let George do his thing. Take it from there, George.
Thank you, Cortez. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come in here and share my story and the obstacles that I've been helped to coming in. I'm glad to hear that you say that this is not a religious program, because I don't really consider myself a religious person, but I recognize the hand of God working in my life. Amen. And I just can't deny it. I was born, I'm the youngest of 4 children, and I am from a good God-fearing Christian family. You know, my grandfather was a deacon. I remember many nights sleeping at the church. I remember as a child, my grandparents lived in right outside of Birmingham in Harrytown, Alabama. And my father had moved up north to Fort Wayne, Indiana to look for work. Mm-hmm. And when we'd go back down there, they'd ship us down to stay with them. On Sunday dinner, after he said grace, we'd have to all go around the table and everybody had to cite a Bible verse from memory in order to stay at the table with the family. If you couldn't quote, and you couldn't come back with Jesus wept every week. You know, I remember at about 7 or 8 years old when I quoted that I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. Okay. That was my Bible verse, and my grandfather just beamed, and I love that he was, to this day, he is my example of what it means to be a man of God. He wasn't just, he lived his faith. And my mother kept along that line. You know, we went to Sunday school and church and Bible study, and I grew up in the church. I grew up learning about Christ and about God. But at some point, probably around 13, 14 years old, once my mother started giving me a choice of whether or not I wanted to go to church, I stopped going to church.
That's what we all do.
Yeah, I there was better things in the streets for me. And I quickly learned that, you know, that all those things, because, you know, my mother was a single mother raising 4 children. And so we didn't have a whole lot. But I quickly learned how to go get things I wanted. Right. I can actually remember the very first time in my life that I did something that I knew was wrong. I stole a comic book. And, oh, man, it was hard. It was difficult. But when I got away and didn't nobody catch me, you know, I did it again and again and again. And at some point, you know, it was like anytime I went into a store, I felt like I had to steal something. I was first arrested at age 12. I stole a train set out of what is now Target. They used to be Airway, but train set was I was this big, train set was this big, and I stole it out the store. And they caught me and they took me to jail. And from age 12 till age 23, I never went 6 straight months without being incarcerated. I was locked up my entire adolescence. I got, at age 13, I got sentenced to 9 months in the Indiana juvenile facility. And I got out, and within 6 months I was arrested later, and the next time I got 15 months. And then by the time I got out, I was at 17 years old, I started going to jail. 19 years old, I got my first adult felony. Actually, that was at 18. I was sentenced at 19. I got burglary and vehicle theft. They gave me 8 years for the burglary and 2 years for the vehicle theft, and they were consecutive. So I got 10 years at 19 years old. And it was about that time that I realized I didn't want to be locked up no more. And I'm smart enough that I knew how to play the system, and you realize that I never really changed my thinking. I just decided to figure out what I need to do to get out and do it. And I did. I graduated from high school in prison. I completed a trade. I got certified as a refrigeration and air conditioning service technician in prison. I got a job. I went to work at the law library, and I would help other inmates who couldn't read to understand their case and file appeals. I served on the inmate council. I played on the inmate basketball team. The basketball team traveled. We won. So I did well. I wrote the judge every month. I wrote the judge a letter saying, yeah, I've learned my lesson. I realized the errors of my ways. And I served a total of, I think, 26 months on a 10-year sentence. And they brought me back to court and modified that sentence to 8 years, got 8 years probation. I turned over to the 2 years, I got out. 8 months later. So y'all get the story, right? I did this repeatedly.
You got something about that 8 months stuff, huh?
Yeah, you think as much as I did it, I'd be better at it. But no, I wasn't. I got another attempted burglary. At one point, I got aggravated assault. So I've been arrested for possession for sales, armed robbery, the vehicle theft. Throughout my case, at age 25, I decided I wanted to get out of the community I was in because I couldn't win. I mean, I already know, everybody knows me. I've got a reputation. I pretty much know that this is my life. I'm going to be in and out of prison my whole life. And I didn't want that. So I picked up and I moved 8,000 miles to the island of Maui. And I stayed on Maui 5 years, and then I actually came back to Dayton, Ohio. And I did well until I moved to California. And I moved to California when I was 32 years old or somewhere around in there. And somebody introduced me to crack cocaine. And I had went several years without, I had done some violations, you know, some jail time here and there, but I hadn't gotten any new sentences. And I got introduced to crack cocaine, and quickly my life spiraled out of control. And I resorted back to the things I knew how to do. I went back to being a hustler. I went back to robbing and stealing to support my drug habit. And as a direct result of something that's important, in 1999 I got diagnosed with a severe persistent mental illness. I got diagnosed with a bipolar disorder. And when exacerbated by drug use, this we learned, we never figured out which came first, the mental illness or the drug use, which caused which. But together, they worked to ruin my life. As a direct result of my drug life and the things that go along with it, I got charged with a battery that resulted in great bodily injury. I got 7 years in California, and they sent me off to the prison again again. And that's where my change started, was in the California Department of Corrections.
Let me do something. Well, let me say something.
Go ahead.
Have you ever heard the saying, you take you wherever you go?
Yeah.
In other words, what I'm saying is, wherever you go, whatever you have, you taking that with you.
That's
See,
true.
we think we can go move to another location, another city, Maui, and think that everything is going to be fine. But we take us with us.
And that's
now,
the
I'm going to leave that right there for a second, because what I'm going to do, we're going to take a break. The Omega Men are going to come back and sing again, and we'll be back with George on the second part of his story. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Done made my vows to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be.
Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be.
When I was a mourner, just like you,
To see what the end will be.
I moaned and moaned till I came through.
To see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be.
If every star refused to shine,
To see what the end will be.
I know King Jesus will be mine.
To see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vows to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be.
Done made my vows to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vows to the Lord, and I never will turn back. Oh, I will go, I shall go to see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord, and I never
Done made my vow to the Lord.
I will
Done
go,
made my vow to the Lord
to see what the end will be.
Done made my vow to the Lord.
And I never
Done made my vow to the Lord.
I will
Done
go,
made my vow to the Lord to see what the end will be. Done made my vow to the Lord.
and I never
Done made my vow to the Lord.
I will
Done made my vow to the Lord to see what the end will be.
Okay, we're back. Now, we was just getting into some more juicy and meaty stuff, so I'll turn it back over to George. I already told him that he take himself wherever he goes, so I'm going to let him take it from there.
Well, that's true. And what I learned early on in the Department of Correction is that my problem is me.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of where I'm at, my problem is with me. I learned this early on. I went to the diagnostic center, which you're supposed to stay in for 30 days, and I stayed there for 6 months because don't you know I'm smarter than everybody else. I figured out a hustle, and I got myself into a position to where I was valuable to the prison. And so they gave me a job and left me in reception. I started hustling. I started making money. I'm the man. I'm doing good. And I had a top bunk, and I remember the lockers are mounted on the walls. I can remember sitting up on my bunk and just looking in my locker, counting my money, because commissary is how you measure your wealth, and I was doing quite well until somebody managed to smuggle some crack cocaine into the prison. In 2 days, my locker emptied. Now I'm sitting here looking at it and I'm thinking, well, I don't need to wash my hair every day. I could sell that shampoo and wash my hair with soap. This is where my mind is went. From a couple of $100 in my locker to not having to wash my hair in the matter of a couple of days. And this is where we had 10 o'clock every night, there is a mandatory standing count where the guard comes by and looks in the window and you have to motion or stand so that the guard can see that you're alive and they can verify you and count you and keep going. And I'm sitting in the room smoking crack. And the guard came by and I'm trying to straighten up and look like I'm not smoking crack. And my room, the cellmate I had at the time, I shouldn't have gave him no crack. But he is just, it's a crazy situation. And the guard came by and I looked over at him and he looked right at me. And he had to know I was high. And he just shook his head, made sure the door was locked, and kept on going. That was my aha moment. That was my wake up. He doesn't care that I'm sitting in here smoking crack. The only thing he cares about is that the door is locked. And that's when I realized this is my life. If I don't do something, this is my life. I'm in here for this, doing this. This is crazy. That was April 1st of 2005. And since that day, I have not put a mood or mind-altering substance into my body.
Amen.
I've not took a drug. I ain't smoked a cigarette. I ain't took a drink. Because I recognize that that's my problem. At my time, I thought, that's my problem. And so at that time, I decided to make that change. And I wrote to the chaplain, and I asked for a Bible. I asked for the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I asked for some help. And I asked for a Bible, and they sent me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't know how that happened, but I'm thanking God at this point because I read the book. And I've used that book as the foundation to change my life. I went through that process, and I come to learn that what that process is truly about is developing a relationship, as they put it, developing a relationship with the higher power. But I'm not confused. I turned back to the God that my mama had. I turned back to the God that my grandfather had. And I started learning about Scripture. I started studying Scripture again. I praise God that my grandfather made me study all them Scriptures. Because I did know that I could do all things through Christ that strengthens me. I knew that if I was faithful and just to confess my sins, that he would forgive me of my sins and cleanse me of all unrighteousness. I knew that there was no temptation that was brought to me that was not common to man, but through that temptation, he would find a way for me to overcome. I counted it all joy when I faced various trials. That through those trials, I would go strengthened, I would go closer to God. I knew, like I said, I knew him.
He knew.
And I went back, and that's what I went back to, and I started studying the Word of God. And I've used that as the foundation to change my life. I come to realize that I found myself somebody who was a true man of God in prison, and this man was a killer. He was a real killer. I mean, cut people up and put them in the trunk killer. And I really admired this person. He carried himself as a man of God, and I said that's what I wanted to be. And he gave me a piece of information that I've never forgotten, that I've shared to people all the time. He told me, imagine the man that you want to be, and do the things that that man would do, and you will be that man. And that's what I've tried to do ever since. I find out that it's not what I think, it's not what I believe. I find out who God says I am, and then try my best to follow what I believe what it is that God would have me to do. And that's what I've done. I paroled on March 6th of 2010. On May 19th of 2010, I started school because I realized that in my whole life, I paroled at 48 years old. I had never held a job for a solid year in my life. So I knew there wasn't no going nowhere and getting a job that was going to afford me to live the quality of life I had when I was hustling.
Right.
And I ain't with being broke. I don't do broke well. Because my motto is, I'm never going to be doing bad so long as somebody else is doing good.
Amen. What we're going to do is we're going to take this final break.
Okay.
And before we leave here, you're going to end your story. And then I want you and the Omega Men to get together. And I want y'all to perform for the ending of the show.
Okay.
So we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Shut up! Stop looking at me! This wasn't supposed to be your life!
Welcome back. We're going to conclude with George and the final part of his story, and then, like I said, we're going to end the show with George and the Omega Men's Choir. So, George, take it.
Well, as I said, I paroled after doing 5 years, 11 months, 3 days. On March 6th of 2010, on May 19th of 2010, I started school because I realized that I'm not going to be able to get the type of job. I had no money saved for retirement. I'm not going to be able to live. So someone told me, it says, well, if you, rather than go out and try to find a job, why don't you find something that you do well and then let a job find you? And so that's what I decided to do. And I went to school. I got, in the first couple of years, I got 2 associate degrees in chemical dependency studies and human services. Then I moved back to Indiana to be near my mother. And I got my bachelor's from Purdue University in human services. Then we moved to Dayton, Ohio. And I got my master's from Case Western Reserve University. I've started a not-for-profit that is called The Change Agency. You can locate us as at The Change Agency, changeatadullam.org.
Say that again. Just look at that camera and put that out there again.
The organization is called The Change Agency, and you can learn more about us at changeatadullam.org. Adullam is, you'll find that in the book of 2 Samuel, when David was running from Saul, and he ran to the caves of Adullam, and he took with him people who were disgraced and in debt and depressed, and he made them into mighty men of God. And David and his mighty men of God came back and unified Israel into one nation, went and got the Ark of the Covenant and rebuilt the temple. And David was a man after God's own heart. But that's why we call our program Adullam, because this is a place where men can come and become mighty men of God. That's my story. Full circle, I've come back to the place where God would have me to be so that God can work through me to help other people. My saying is that God didn't bless me to make my life better.
Amen.
God blessed me so that I can help other people.
All right. And that's what it's all about. And that's what this program is about. It's about people coming on, telling their story, their way, not my way, their way. And when you get a chance to listen to different people when they tell a story, and you listen to it and you sit back and you start thinking to yourself, and you say, you know what? I went through the same thing. I might not win it the way you did it, but I actually went through the same story. Your story is my story. You know, our story is everybody's story. And when we get a chance to really tell it our way, like I said, this is not a gospel program, but we are spiritual. God had moved us in many, many ways. I always wanted to do a one-man play based off of my life. And can you imagine if all of us had that opportunity to really sit back and be able to tell our story our way, not somebody else telling our story. So I just want to say thank you again to the Men of Omega Male Choir, Mr. George Logan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to leave you with the Omega Men's Choir and George Logan as we wrap up our show. And if you would like to come on our show and you got a story you want to tell, come see me. Call me up. You can call me at 937-401-0585. Come on the show. Tell somebody else what you went through. We all got a story. Do you want to leave a number any way that somebody can get in touch with you?
Changeatadullam.org. ChangeAtadullam.org.
God bless you, and we'll see you next time on You Don't Know My Story.
Has anybody ever had the devil steal something from
Come on.
See, we know what that's like.
Come on.
And this is how we did that.
Yes,
We
sir.
looked right at the devil and we told him, everything that you stole from me, I'm taking it back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is that what we told him? Let's tell him with it. Come on with me, fellas. You ready?
Everything that you stole from me, I'm taking it back.
You got to tell the devil just like that, like you mean it. Tell him again, fellas.
Everything that you stole from me, I'm taking it back.
That's what he did. Check this out. You tried to steal my joy. You tried to steal my peace. Well, I'm tired of crying and always feeling weak. I take 2 steps forward. You knock me 4 steps back. I'm so sick of you lying about this and that. So from this day forward, some things are gonna change. 'Cause I'm taking back everything that you stole from me in Jesus' name.
Everything that you stole from me, I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back. We're taking it right back. Yeah.
Everything that you stole from me,
Everything.
I'm taking it back.
What he did. You tried to steal my family. You tried to kill my name. Then you attacked my body and caused so much pain. I've almost lost my mind playing all these games. Well, everything you stole from me, I'm taking it back in Jesus' name.
Everything that you stole from me, I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back. We're taking it right back. Yeah.
Everything that you stole from me,
Everything.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back. We're taking it right back. One more time.
Everything that you stole from me, I'm taking it back.
Y'all know why? You know why?
Come on, what?
'Cause it's mine.
It's mine.
It's all mine.
It's mine.
And you can't have it. So we're taking it back.
And I'm taking it back.
'Cause it's
mine.
It's all mine.
It's mine.
God
You
gave
can't have
it. So we're taking it back. We're taking
I'm
it back.
taking it back.
'Cause it's mine. It's all mine.
It's mine.
Yeah.
You can't have it.
So we're taking it back.
And I'm taking it back.
'Cause it's mine. It's all mine.
It's mine.
You can't
have it.
So I'm taking it back.
And I'm taking it back. Everything that you stole from me,
Everything.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back. We're taking it right back. Yeah.
Everything that you stole from me,
Everything.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it right back. Hey.
Everything that you stole from me,
Everything.
I'm taking it back.
Well, I'm taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
My love.
I'm taking it back.
My joy.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
My family.
I'm taking it back.
my peace.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
In the name of Jesus.
I'm taking it back.
In the name of Jesus.
I'm taking it back.
We're taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
I'm taking it back.
I'm taking it back. Everything that you stole from me, I'm taking it back.
Yes, yes, yes.
Amen.
We are taking it back.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
I want to thank the Omega Men's Choir for such a great job today that they have done.
Yes, sir.
And like I said before, my buddy Dennis back there, I just can't thank him enough for what he done for my show.
I appreciate
And
it.
George,
Amen.
No problem, man.
thank you, sir.
Amen.
You did a fantastic job. All of y'all did a fantastic job. You need to give yourself a hand. But like they said, whatever the devil stole from us, we're taking it back. We're taking our family back.
Amen.
We're
Amen.
taking our finances back.
Amen.
We're taking our homes back.
Amen.
Devil, you ain't got nothing on us.
Amen.
We're taking it back. Once again, I want to thank Omega Men's Choir, George, Logan, for appearing on today's show. God bless you guys.
Amen.
I enjoyed you. Really did.
Thanks, man.
Y'all did a great job.
Amen.
We're taking it back.
Yeah, take it all back.
We're taking it all back.
Amen.
Like the brother said, we're taking it all back. So everyone, until next time,
Amen.
you don't know our story.
Amen.
Amen.